Dear participants, good evening and greeting to all of us, and wishing everyone also a very happy Karwa Chauth. My name is Amit Sharma from the IIA Delhi chapter, and I would like to start by thanking everyone for taking out time to attend this online training. Now, just dwelling on today's topic a little bit. Today's environment, nearly all organizations need to work with vendors or third-party suppliers. There are many risks associated with relying on vendors. In fact, the more essential the vendor service or the product, the greater is the risk. In order to ensure, the company is not exposed to unnecessary risks or compliance issues, or say even negative publicity, risk management needs to be a core part of the vendor management program. And internal auditors need to understand vendor risk better in order to ensure adequate review of the requirements, being done by them. Given this background, we're very glad to host this whole online training on the subject of vendor risk management. Now, a few hygiene points to make before I introduce our speakers for today's session. So during the training, I just request everyone to keep themselves on mute. And in case any participants has got any questions, you can use the chat window for putting up your questions or clarifications, and the speakers shall pick it up, at an appropriate time. With this, I'd like to introduce our speakers for today's session. First is Ms. Yukti Arora. Yukti is a process, risk, and technology practice leader at Shinewing India, and is a co-founder of women collaboration startup Omya Consulting Services. She has more than 2 decades of experience in the field of process and risk advisory. She is a chartered accountant, a CISA and a DISA, and has previously worked as a director with risk advisory function of a Big Four. Focus is business and IT process advisory and audit, and she's worked extensively in manufacturing, consumers, automobile, e-commerce, BPO, and the IT sector. She's a regular faculty with the Digital Accounting and Assurance Board and the Internal Audit Standard Board of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, and also in the area of core banking system, RPA and blockchain. He's developed a concept note on RPA for ICAI and has contributed multiple articles in the ICAI journals on RCAs and IT audit. He regularly delivers lectures and trainings for ISACA and IIA Delhi chapter. And I was just a few minutes just before this session started just saying that Yukti is actually a star for taking out time for giving this training. So my thanks and appreciation to Yukti, for taking this whole training. So thank you, Yukti.
Thanks, Amit.
Thanks. Let me also introduce our second speaker for today's session, Mr. Mukesh Gupta. Mukesh is currently working as a director in risk advisory with Deloitte. So he's also a chartered accountant. He's a CIA, a CISA, and a certified fraud examiner. He has around 20 plus years of experience across multiple geographies around the globe and working with Fortune 100 companies and Big Four firms. He has delivered several compliance management, ERM, risk consulting trainings with the Fortune 500 companies. He's been a faculty of a management institute, and he's delivered several training sessions for clients as well, as per his role in the Big Four. So Mukesh, thank you very much also for taking out time and giving this session. We totally appreciate this, and I'm sure our participants will also learn from this session.
It's my
So with
pleasure, Amit,
this,
and it's my pleasure to be working with IIA and having the lovely audience to give whatever we have learned on different subjects. And today's subject is vendor risk management. Thank you, the participants and Amit, for inviting us on the session.
thanks very much. And let me tell you that, IIA is actually privileged to be working with professionals with you. And hopefully together, I think with this session, even our participants should be able to get, take out some good learnings from today. So having said this, let me hand it over to Yukti. Yukti, over to you. And thanks once more.
Thanks, Amit, for wonderful, it's actually introduction. Wonderful to be connecting back with all of you. And good evening to all the audience. Looking forward to sharing the information and learning from the questions which you post on the chat box. So quickly we go to the topic, the agenda of the session, which is covering various aspects of why this is relevant and why we are talking about this, and some of the views which some leading audit and assurance bodies have on it. Then we'll cover some insights on the risk management survey, including what has come out as a key findings and what is to be done from an internal audit perspective. And covering, then we will be discussing a very brief about a good risk management framework, what it takes to be a good risk management framework, and then some of the actions for effective risk management of vendors. And at the end, we'll conclude with the consideration from the internal auditor perspective on a vendor risk management process. So, Mukesh, if you can go to the next slide. If we look at the current vendor landscape for the enterprise, each one of us must that every organization in some or other way they are working with lot of vendor, and in fact in every functions and department, whether it is sales and distributions, we are seeing the distributors are there. In tourism industry they are loyalty partners, and in telecom industry they are customer service and customer support centers which helps in distributions, and then there are a lot of sales agent in manufacturing and other trading, and also in the BFSI segment. So this segment has lot and lot of input which is coming out of the third parties. And then if you look at the customer support, most of the companies outsource these types of functions, and wherein they run call centers and service and warranty processing. Those are also another places where we interact with vendors. The facility functions also has the people from whom they manage for the purpose of cleaning, for security, for office products. HR, most of the organizations use some other vendors for payroll processing, for recruitment. Even in organizations which are very smaller or startup, they also use these HR functions quite extensively. Marketing, again, many of them are using various types of agencies, both for social media as well as advertisement, and then print media also. We use outsourced third-party vendors. Technology, many of the products and services are now on cloud. We use some or other cloud service provider, whether it is for security, whether it is for infrastructure, whether it is for application, whether it is for management of the operations or help desk management. Similar is the situations with sourcing, and we have various types of information which flows from various vendors, and then sometimes even the products and all are just sourced from all the vendors, and then they are just assembled and delivered from the help of logistic, which is again a third-party service provider. R&D also, typically if we say to take the certification or licensing and all, we again interact. So the whole landscape is a landscape where there are lot and lot of these third-party vendors, or we can say an extended enterprises which are connected. And in fact, a small error or a small mistake at one end of fraud at one end or something which goes wrong at one end has a far-reaching impact to the organizations which is using. Specifically, if the names are very big, then even the small vendors, they don't even get impacted that much as the large vendors, the organizations who are using these vendors get impacted. We must have seen a lot of examples where if something goes wrong with a big brand name, even if it is a small thing, and the vendor is very small, but a small mistake of health or a small mistake of wrong background verification check or a small mistake with reference to providing support to the customers or giving loyalty services, it really impacts the whole reputation, and also the risk of compliances and cyber are very, very high when we use these types of vendors. And therefore, it's extremely important that the organization look at these risks from a reputation, from a compliance, from a financial, from a cyber, and most importantly, from the health as well as various types of EHS services and overall management of providing a seamless services to ensure that they are in the right thing and looking at performing work as per the values and the culture and the ethics of the organization. So now the vendors and all, they also have to replicate the same thing, and therefore the risk management takes a much bigger dimension, considering this as one of a big area to be looked at, both from the risk perspective as well as the reputation perspective. Can we go to the next slide? So, in fact, because of this, there are lot of things which have come to a notice. And the first thing which happened was even the COSO 2013, which was there. It was revised to cover aspects of external vendors or third party and include the aspects of they be considered for the purpose of overall assessment of control environment, doing a risk assessment, ensuring the control activities which are with the vendors are also considered and managed, and the overall response with the organizations, and they are tested and delivered in a right and efficient manner. And there is a proper information and communication both in the inside as well as external environment, and monitoring happens across the whole enterprise, including the third party vendors as well. Even our Institute of Internal Auditor, they also have issued a practice guide on this, which is third party risk management audit, and it's a very elaborate and extensively covered topic with various questions also from an internal audit perspective on various domains. And what key aspects it says is that the risk third party risk management should cover aspects of having a proper risk management approach, wherein there is a proper planning and understanding and scoping, and then there should be a framework, not a framework to a particular vendor, but an overall framework for managing the enterprise wide risk of third party. And then when we are doing and dealing with them vendors, we should have a clear risk appetite statements, not only at an individual level but at a business unit level, encompassing those vendors as well. And there has to be a proper governance structure, including ownership at the board level, wherein there are for the specific, generally what happens is, depending on the level of contract, the involvement of senior or the board gets involved. But here when we talk, when this practice guide is saying, it says that the governance structure should be such that the risk management framework should have an ultimate responsibility with the board being responsible for the same. And then there has to be a proper process with respect to sourcing of various vendors, looking at the aspects of how the selections of vendors are done, due diligence is done from a risk perspective, how the contracting are done, what are the terms and conditions, looking at the monitoring aspects of seeing whether the SLAs and all are measured and monitored, and all the issues and all which are there, either they are resolved or the corrective action. If they are not taken, then the penalties are imposed. And sometime it may happen that you have to terminate. Then how you take back the services, transition to the new vendors, or to your existing team, that also needs to be covered in overall process of it. So the whole purpose of this IIA practice guide is to enable internal auditors so that they could discharge their roles and responsibilities with respect to third-party risk, as well as look at the various activities and how they can work together with the first line business in discharging their responsibilities of providing the input from a controls perspective. Also, it lays down the third-party risk management internal audit coverage approach and framework of looking at it, and the way the typical areas which should be in the scope of third-party risk and how to do those aspects, right from planning to the execution and delivering of the report. Even we all know AICPA is SOC, SAS 70 was there, now SOC 1, SSA 18. They are standards which lays down with respect to third parties. And in fact, this IIA practice guide also gives a reference wherein it says that even for the due diligence and all, we should take the SOC 1 and SSA 18 report just to make sure that the terms and conditions and various control environment are understood, culture and other things are understood before we enter into an agreement with the third party vendor. And Institute of Chartered Accountant of India, SIA 220, with reference to the planning of internal audit, it also says that when you are putting the universe and scoping, you have to look at the aspects of third party, considering that they play a major role in delivering end-to-end solutions by the organization. And we have to cover that from a risk perspective as in the part of overall audit. And this has been one of the and almost all organizations have been doing, and this has been one of the biggest reason why the emphasis have been made more on this managing of the third party risk and the vendor risk management program. And that's what Mukesh also will speak on the insights which we have from the surveys.
Okay, thank you, Yukti. So if you look at the context, participants, it's very clear that existence of an organization is highly dependent on the service provider, and you won't really find even a single organization in India or outside India which would be doing all of their work without engaging anyone. Just imagine a case where let's say everything is in house, but you still hire security guards, you still hire housekeeping staff, you still have someone who's providing food to you. So at a very, very basic organization, you will still have an outsourcing, and some of the outsourcing is a function of even the competency which is available in the organization. So for example, some of the unique skills, like let us say if you were to deal with cybersecurity at a organization level, it is very difficult to bring right set of talent and retain them unless you have work for them 24/7 type. Therefore, some of the outsourcing is driven by the basic nature of the work, and you can't really have on-roll housekeeping staff or security guard. Some of the outsourcing will be because of the niche skills which is available outside, and you can't really build it or retain it for a longer period of time. And also, if you really go back in history, even at the ancient time, there was a concept of barter system. The barter system was, if someone is a farmer, he will exchange grain with vendors who were, let's say, a cloth vendor, shoe vendor, goldsmith, and some other person in the village. So this whole outsourcing is going back to the ancient time, and all of us would have observed in some shape or form. And even if you look at your own house, there are a lot of things you depend upon outsourced service provider, be it a maid, security in your apartment, some bit of housekeeping. and let's say someone who is giving support to you in terms of ironing the cloth, repairing of your electronic goods, and so on and so forth. So pretty much outsourcing is going back in time, and therefore we got to clearly understand what it means for the organization in terms of its dependency, and what are some of the eminent risk which is emerging out of it, and how do we deal with it. More particularly, there are different institutes which has laid emphasis on these matter, which Yukti has spoke about. Let me now take you to a different dimension. That this is a survey done by one of the large professional service firm, and it gives you an insight of a global insight on what are some of the attributes which are being considered for the purpose of third-party risk management, and what are the trends. So let's move on. Now, the first insight, there are 6 broader insights which are being given in this survey, and I'll go one by one. First attribute is cost of failure. The first insight under this is 30% of the listed company who have participated in the survey believe that share price could fall 10% or more if third-party incidents are not managed adequately. So therefore, 10% share price drop for 30% of the listed company is a pretty significant number, and therefore it has extreme relevance for all the organization. That's a message which is being conveyed by way of this insight, and therefore a lot of focus and a lot of regulations in India and outside India with respect to outsourcing. Second, 11% of the participants believe that financial exposure in case of any third-party incidents could be as high as 1 billion and above. And 1 billion and above, even in the US currency, is a pretty huge number. And in India, it is pretty much multiplied by 75. So it's even higher. 19% of the participants believe that financial exposure could be more than half a billion or more. So pretty much a significant number of participants believe that it will have significant impact on the share price and significant in terms of the financial fines, penalties, etc., which you may have to kind of face in case of any third party instance. For example, let's take a very simple example. If you are a bank and you are managing your customer onboarding process through a third party, in case there is a cyber attack on that third party server and customers data is being taken away, it will have millions of lawsuit coming to that bank. And then imagine millions of lawsuit, how much it really result to in terms of the financial penalty. I'll give you one instance very recently happened somewhere in the globe. One of the hospitality service provider, very large one, without naming that service provider, they had a cyber attack, and because of the cyber attack their data was taken away, in the sense that who was staying, what was his number, and how many nights person has stayed, who was stayed along with him or her, etc., etc. And then those hacker group called different customers saying that you stayed in this hotel from this period to this period along with your spouse, and we have hidden cameras in the room, and therefore there are some pictures which is being taken by those camera, and you really don't want those pictures to be out in the public, and therefore you go to pay X amount of money, as in kind of a incentive for us to not reveal those information to the world at large, which means in a social media. Imagine this small instance which is being done, and this is predominantly emanating from one of the service provider handling that customer data for them. World over, the reputation of that hospitality service provider has gone down significantly, and a lot of guests have indeed paid that ransom, and they filed a counterclaim on the hotel for breach of trust and data loss, etc. So that's really is the implication when you talk about cost of failure. Also, 30% of the people in the survey says that the impact is going to be moderate or high. So all these insight in terms of cost of failure demonstrate that this is an area which require significant consideration in terms of how do you manage a third party risk. And the message of the survey essentially is, in terms of the point of view, is you have to have good risk management, and these risk management aspects are sometimes highlighted because of some instance which has happened or a crisis which has happened. Like pandemic is another sort of a crisis which has told us a lot of things, and let's say cybersecurity is an issue, or a data security is indeed an issue which has gained a prominence because of the instance which has happened already. So net, if you were to really manage the cost of failure with respect to third party, you have to have a good risk management process in place. So that's insight number one. Let's move to the second one, which says balancing responsibility and cost. So that's the second insight. And if you look at what are some of the top trends in terms of the investment drivers, 47% of the respondent believe that it is because of the third party instance. So it's like an instance driven investment driver. That's one. 45% believe that it is because of the regulatory requirement. World over, there are different requirements with respect to data security, data privacy, and outsourcing norms, third-party reviews, SOC 1, SOC 2, and many other such requirements. So 45% is indeed saying that because of the regulatory requirement, we end up spending money on TPRM, which is third-party risk management. Also, interestingly, 43% of the people says that we have a responsibility, which means as a responsible organization, you got to manage that third-party risk, because at the end of the day, when a data is taken away, sometime it could indeed compromise security of the country. For example, if a defense data is being managed by someone outside of the defense, and if that data is being compromised, it can indeed have a security risk for the country as a whole. And hence, a lot of such business who have some connection of that sort, they believe that for us to be a responsible business unit, we will really invest on TPRM. Cost reduction is another driver which is being considered by most of the people. And if you look at why we really outsource, so as I've said, one is that there is a niche competency which you can't build or can't retain. That's one reason. And the other bigger reason of outsourcing is indeed the cost, because when you do it at a scale, you end up saving a lot of cost. Part of it will definitely be passed on to the recipient or the customer. Part of it will be passed on to customer, part of it will be retained by that service provider at their incentive to run the business. And hence outsourcing is cost reduction is indeed a bigger driver for outsourcing, and which is why you see a lot of outsourcing companies flourish or have flourished in India. And now there are a lot of other countries like Philippines and Budapest and Guatemala, etc., where these outsourcing is flourishing significantly. Also, climate change, environment, and environment is also a significant driver in terms of people are investing, because the impact on environment and climate is being considered very significantly. A lot of these world global forums, etc., you find climate being talked about, environment being talked about very rigorously, and therefore that's also a driver. In some of the countries in US and Europe, the labor laws, financial crimes, etc., is also one of the driver where you end up investing money in terms of the TPRM project. Here, if you really look at leadership, sometimes is reluctant to commission rigorous review. That's an issue which is being considered in that survey, and therefore it's about how leadership look at those matters and drive investment. Because if you really not invest into these TPRM compliance related matters, it will have many such instances which could have far greater penalty for companies to face. Now let's look at the third bucket, which is increasing regulatory activity. Absolutely, 45% believe that we invest in TPRM because of regulatory pressure. Regulators are active all over the world, and since they are to protect society at large, and therefore they drive investments in terms of a lot of governance, a lot of audits, etc. And some of the global framework like COSO 2013, for example, specifically talked about outsourcing as one of the risks to be considered in the 17 principle, COSO 17 principle, which are there in the document. Similarly, 20% or less believe that they have an effective monitoring of critical subcontractor. Therefore, there is a high need at a basis the survey for better monitoring of subcontractor, because at the end of the day, whatever we do, the outcome will come to us or impact will come to us. Subcontractor is working on our behalf, and in most large company, you won't even know who the service provider is or a subcontractor is, and their name is absolutely nothing in the market, and therefore they will never be disgraced as such. And the larger organization will always get a blunt of they didn't manage it well. So therefore, since there is a high opportunity in terms of effective monitoring, which is what is one of the objective of the TPRM framework, then 40% believe that they have approximate they have appropriate exit plan for critical third party. Now, when you follow an outsourcing, the biggest point is it's very difficult to roll it back, because let's say if you decide to hive off your finance function, if you decide to kind of hive off your customer onboarding department, all the talent would have moved away. Either you would have asked them to leave, or you would have redirected them to other function in your department. Over time, the talent has vanished. Therefore, you have to have a rock solid mechanism of managing the critical third party. If those are not being managed, your business is going to be crippled. Let's take an example. If organization work with only one logistics service provider, if for some reason they fail, the logistics service provider would fail, it will cripple the organization. Since you committed to your customer that let's say your material will be delivered in 2 days, if your logistics service provider fail, you can't meet your commitment. If you can't meet your commitment, your customers will move to the alternate person or alternate company, which is your nearest competition, and therefore it's a loss of business. So therefore, managing the third party, critical third party is absolutely a mission critical for most organization. And another insight which has come up in the survey is that 59% believe that TPRM procedures are not flexible enough to assess smaller third parties. There are a lot of smaller third parties. How do you really apply basic principle and still manage your risk is something which is an opportunity coming up in the survey. And the insight here is that optimum state of TPRM is a moving target for many organizations, meaning that what is optimum is something which keeps changing based on the environment and other things, and hence it's an opportunity for all of us to really keep applying good practices so that organization will minimize the risk of any major third-party failures. Let's move on. And fourth insight is vision and transformation. Most service providers are not happy, most companies are not happy with the technology which is being deployed for TPRM. There are different level of challenges, and therefore technology play in TPRM is the biggest item which needs to be considered for any TPRM function to be most effective. Therefore, there are a lot of tools and technology which are being developed in India and outside world also, which tries to fix the TPRM technology matters. Because imagine in a large organization, you sometimes work with even 200, 300 service provider. How do you really deal with those 200, 300 service provider without a technology is the bigger question, and hence technology needs to be understood or maybe refined to a level where it has a real-time visibility of the issues. Then leveraging external assistance, another trigger which has come up. 57% are using center of excellence, and 54% are using or intend to use shared service center. So therefore, net 71% are either using COE or shared service center, which are in-house. So therefore, this third-party management predominantly is an in-house function in the form of a COE or SSE, and hence there is an opportunity for the entire management of TPRM to be managed completely out in an outsource model. If you do that, there are a lot of advantage, because these large professional service firms and specialized companies, they deal with this whole TPRM for many clients, and hence they have all tools, technologies, knowledge, etc., which can be leveraged. And eventually, if you do that, you end up saving a lot of technology obsolescence cost, because technology is changing at a very fast pace. Whatever latest technology you may deploy, by the time it is deployed, it is obsolete. It's very simple. The time it takes from a machine to move from UK to India, that is the time it takes for any technology to be obsolete. I mean, that's the world. This is the speed at which world is moving, and hence it's always a good idea to use these large firms, because they can because of managing so many clients, they can really keep up to speed with respect to technology. Then TPRM is a key priority for most organizations. If you look at 32% of the CEO has ultimate accountability for TPRM, and hence organization is becoming far more active on these matter. And since CEO has an ultimate accountability, and therefore it is gaining more momentum, things are happening at a faster pace, and the roadblocks in a way are getting minimized by way of leadership time, involvement, and commitment coming into play. And therefore the people down the line are also focusing of this being an important priority for them. So these are the 6 global insight, and there are a lot to learn from these insight with respect to opportunities and the threat, and how do we really run our TPRM function within large organization. So let's now move on to the risk management framework. If you look at the risk management framework, it has 9 pillars. So each of these pillars have different areas which needs to be dealt with. And under these pillars, there are basic process, like you have to have a tool, dashboard, and reporting. We have to have a PMO who manage all of those vendor programs, and there needs to be enough training and awareness in the organization with respect to how do you run this entire subject. And it's quite obvious that you really can't have training and awareness unless you have a robust policy procedure in place. So pretty much that's the framework. And let me just now show you at each of these bucket as to what are some of the pointers which needs to be dealt with under each of the sub point I'm talking about. There are these 4 pillars which are important. First is governance and finance. Within governance and finance, first and foremost is how do you really define your contract vetting processes in place? Do you have a right to audit in all your contract? How do you evaluate your vendor strength? And whether the vendor have enough liquidity to work with you. For example, if you work with a logistics service provider, he can't really have financial strength to hire more vehicle. He can't really serve you in future, because you will grow, and therefore he has to expand his capacity in terms of more manpower, more machinery, etc. So evaluating financial and liquidity of the third party is extremely important, and this is gaining momentum in the pandemic for that matter. Whatever was the strength of the vendor last year, it may not be the same case this year, because the pandemic has changed significantly in the way the strength of your vendors are. Therefore, there's a clear need to reassess the vendor strength, both financial as well as from a liquidity standpoint, to reassure the firm or the organization that you can still work with those service provider. Or alternatively, you have to have more service provider to support in your journey of achieving a business objective. Also, regulatory is an area which is pretty much non-negotiable. There needs to be a process of ensuring regulatory compliances. As we know, we are the parent organization. Therefore, whatever we do ultimately, whatever that service provider will do, ultimately responsibility will fall on us, either directly or indirectly, in terms of brand reputation, compliances, etc. So you have to have a view on how would he ensure compliance, what is the framework he has, what type of cybersecurity he has, what is his reputation in past in terms of customer issues, etc. And are there any news with respect to regulatory non-compliance which is there for particular service provider? Because if he is disgraced, your organization can also be disgraced. So it's like a direct relationship, and therefore deeper scrutiny is required in terms of the service provider level regulatory compliance mechanism. Also on the corporate responsibility, all of us wants to be responsible organization, and therefore how your third parties are managing environment, how are they managing employee conditions, their health, hygiene, etc., is extremely important. And therefore there has to be a parameter on how do you assess your vendors on these softer parameters of corporate social responsibility, and arrive at would you like to deal with them. Let's say if someone found keeping employees in bad health or bad environment, it will have an indirect reputation issue for the parent organization. The next pillar is the resilience. In resilience, as we know, pandemic has taught us everything, frankly. Business continuity and disaster recovery is absolutely non-negotiable, and therefore the business continuity and disaster recovery procedure needs to be refreshed. There should be training and awareness. Again, it needs to be realigned based on the reality check which all of us have undergone in terms of different issues and different ways of working, remote working environment, different type of cyber security required, different type of access rights being managed in this environment, etc. And also evaluate at resilience at a vendor level also, as to how the vendors are managing these things, and will they be able to support you when there is a need. For example, if your customer commitment is 2 days, if your vendor can't recover his data or his process in 2 days, then you can't meet customer's commitment. And therefore whatever commitment you have given to the customer, your vendor should also be able to support that commitment by way of direct in the sense back-to-back arrangement. Now let's move on to the other 8 pillars, which is EHS, intellectual property, billing and performance, and integrity. When you look at environment, health and safety, this is an area which is very dear to government, and right set of policy procedure are extremely relevant for you to have a view on whether your subcontractor will able to align to your EHS policy, because most factories are sometimes outsourced, and therefore environment, health and safety policy of the company needs to be imbibed by the third party, and they should be equally trained on those policy procedures and all the critical issues, accident, etc., in respect of in the factory definitely should come to the parent organization so that they have a view on what is happening at an outsourced service provider. Also on the intellectual property, very clearly IPR is an area which is slightly nascent in India. Globally, it's very well established subject. Here IPR is slightly not so, even though it is regulated, but the enforcement is slightly at a lower level, and hence there is an opportunity for IPR infringement, and therefore it's important for us to really have a right set of procedures defined for the third party, so that at least your intellectual property is fully taken care of. And predominantly today everything is data, so therefore your right on data needs to be clearly established. And how do you protect your data with respect to data security, data retention, data retrieval, and data cleaning, etc., or maybe destruction? All of this needs to be well understood at a subcontractor level. Also on billing and performance, if you look at there needs to be a well-defined service level agreement at a vendor level, and then somebody should be really taking care of those SLA monitoring, and it should be independent of the user department, because user department will always have invested interest to deal with those outsourced service provider. So let's say a contracting department or a purchase department or a finance department are really the right set of individual who can ensure SLA compliance. And if there are non-compliances to SLAs, then whatever penalties, etc., needs to be levied, it should be levied unless there is a valid reason for non-compliance. Particularly, some of the outsourced service provider needs to provide you, let's say, a bank guarantee or a letter of credit or a security, etc., while they are onboarded. If those are not being provided, tomorrow if there's a dispute, you really can't have anything to stand by, and hence those are important parameters which needs to be reviewed at an independent level to arrive at that the service provider is doing very well. Integrity is an area which is gaining importance, and more particularly if a company happens to be of the US and UK, there are FCPA and UK Anti-Bribery Act which are in place, which has very stringent regulation in terms of these anti-bribery practices. Similar law exists in India also, so therefore you will have same or similar type of requirement coming out of the anti-corruption law in India. Net the point is, whatever anti-corruption policies are there in the organization, same needs to be ensured by your third party. So there has to be a declaration, there has to be contract terms. Somebody should also independently go and check whether they are in compliance to all those policy procedure, and more particularly their employees, etc., who are dealing with your customers, your suppliers at a point in time. So pretty much at each of the area there are different set of actions to be done, and if we really manage these pillars well, we should be successful in terms of managing our third party. The next area which Yukti will take up is the cyber related, and I'll move to that slide and hand it over to Yukti. Thank you, Yukti. You may now take over, and I'll show you all for you to discuss.
So thanks, Mukesh. So in fact, if you look at from a cyber perspective, that's one of the most important thing which Mukesh has highlighted. And that's the reason why many of the companies have started investing a lot in having these vendor risk management programs and making sure that there is a mechanism to measure those programs. And it starts, and because of this is why, because we are using large amount of third party providers, whether it is on the infrastructure side or whether it is on the application side or whether it is even on the management of endpoints. And for the same, the organizations, whatever policy procedures or whatever they have, the way or mechanism for governance and looking at the reviews of making sure that those policies and procedures are adhered to, the same governance mechanism they have to see whether they are being replicated for, and therefore they need to see that which services, first of all they need to have the inventory of what all is being purchased and where these things get applicable and what all systems we have, including and not only the systems from a perspective of infrastructure, but also from a perspective of information. If we are taking those and data related services also we are taking, so we have to cover it from that perspective also. Make sure that if we are using some services, then in that case the policy procedures and whatever the plans are there from the third party, we've understood them, or either they are better than us or they have replicated our organization's policy procedures. And then there has to be a clear ownership also. That's another important element which one organization has to see, who's responsible for managing the resources, for owning the relationship, and making sure that SLAs and all are delivered and measured, and if any incidents are there, then they are adequately dealt with and escalated. Because if the incidents are not well managed, that becomes the most biggest falling point for any organization. And that's the reason many these frauds and all which happens by the third party vendors, they don't get identified and it comes back from a press rather than organizations themselves knowing it. Ideally the organization should first find it out rather than it coming directly from an outside places. Another aspect which we have to see as an organization is on the data protection. So we have to look at how the assets have been classified, inventory has been done, classification has been done. If we are putting it in the custody of third party, that they have to make sure that they either adhere to our classification or they have an equivalent classification and implement those procedures. And if we are using some cloud services specifically on, in that case, we have to see how the data protection tools are being there. We have to cover the aspects of privacy, compliances, and understand the complete data flow, because that becomes a basic, that which is within the organization and which is outside the organizations, and then accordingly laying down a program and management mechanism for the same. DLP configuration also has to be seamless, including our as well as other organizations, and making sure that overall the management of the security is as per the business policies and procedures. Training and awareness organizations generally do well on the training with their employees, but many of times we have seen cyber frauds and all the information being leaked not by insiders but by the vendor employee who has not been adequately trained on dealing with the information and making sure that they don't disclose it to anyone. And also looking at the incident management protocols. Many organizations are using virtualized network and are on cloud, specifically on the infrastructure. So we have to make sure that the infrastructure is very well configured. Security is all about configuration in case of cloud environment. All features are there, but organizations have to configure it. So we have to make sure that the configurations with respect to access, with respect to providing various endpoints, controls and all has been done. On the infrastructure side, the various types of network related settings on ACL and all has been properly done. And we have to see the ingress and egress, which is information coming inside and outside till it goes to the service provider, it is efficiently protected, and as well when it is with the service provider, what type of protection layers they have with respect to the services and how it is being measured by them. Also, we have to cover the aspects of segmentations, including the network micro-segmentations, integrating policies and procedures. On the vigilant, it is extremely important that the organizations, when dealing with the third-party service provider, they have a good mechanisms to see and how they are managing specifically any security incidents and events if they happen, and they are aware of, and they are actually building by design these security mechanisms wherein all the notifications and all those things come so that they can measure and manage and develop a better relationship with respect to the information security and cyber security management with the third party vendor is concerned. So in effect, like if we see all these are one of the basic parameters which one has to see on the governance, protection, virtualize and vigilant, and whatever policy, procedures, information, data, security, which as an organization we have decided they need to be replicated by the third party service provider, and equivalent level of security which has been laid down by our organization need to be developed and demonstrated by the third party, otherwise corrective action needs to be done. Now what an internal auditor can do in all these things, these things are generally by work of first line of defense, and what is the role of internal auditor in all these things. So primarily when we take up a program or when we do an audit of any of the domain and where there is a third party service provider and we are doing if this audit of VRM, we have to see how the sourcing has been done, how actually the decision was taken by we went for what was the objective of going with the third party, what was the reliability of the basis on which we prepared the business case, and whether it was something which was actually required or not required, and can question on those based on the data and information which was realized and for the purpose of doing this business case. Also, they can look at the organization's governance approval process of how they enter into relationship with the third party, specifically doing the elements of contacting them, making sure that they are talking to the right set of people, making sure that there is no pending cases or some regulatory sanctions, or there are some issues on reputations and all. That needs to be considered by even by taking the first initial decisions of whether to go with this thing or not, because certain things are so very much regulated that it would be a good decision to be in-house rather than taking it outside and giving it to the third-party vendors. Also, on the due diligence, auditors need to verify and validate whether proper third-party risk assessment was confirmed and the elements of aspects of selections, not only from a financial parameter but from a reputation parameter, from the EHS parameters, and all the parameters which we talked about, whether they were considered while doing the assessment, and if this within the risk appetite of the organizations, and then we'll take a call on doing it. from a contracting point of view, generally we have seen a lot of organizations have separate contracts with the smaller vendors, different type of contract with an IT vendor, third type of contract with a maybe real estate or a different contract with the customer support. We can have different SLAs and all those things, but basic terms and conditions, aspects of code of conduct, confidentiality, aspects of making sure that we will monitor SLA, aspects of anti-bribery, various aspects on in case there is a dispute, how we will go, force measures, all those things are properly dealt and defined, and they are standard across. There could be some exceptions which could be done with reference to legal. Monitoring of KPIs and SLAs another element which an internal auditor definitely should see, and if from a perspective their SLAs are not being met, then what type of actions are being taken. If there are a lot of third parties, and then there are fourth parties also, which are the vendors, vendors. So we have to see how they are being considered. Issue resolutions, if they are being properly done, specifically with respect to in case there is breach of contract, and how the issues are being resolved, as well as they are not being repeated. That is what is to be checked by the internal auditor. Otherwise, the action of termination as a process should be there. And as Mukesh has rightly pointed out, termination is one of the most critical aspect, because if the terms and conditions are not well defined, and if we don't know how to, if we lose the staff or the people who are the skill sets who can do it, then sometimes the decision of termination becomes a deferred decision, and it's a very hard decision, and when we become very comfortable in a particular mode of things. But if the contracts are not performing, the hard decisions have to be taken, and we should plan in our vendor risk management program to deal with it. So that's from an internal audit perspective. Any questions, or Mukesh, you have some views to conclude on? You are on mute, Mukesh.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Now, if you really look at the landscape which got presented, first and foremost, it is quite evident that every organization depend upon outsourcing, and hence that is a non-negotiable. It's a non-negotiable area. That's one. Secondly, if you look at different regulations asking us to ensure adequate level of controls are defined with respect to outsourcing, be it IIA, COSO, AICPA, and even ICI guidelines, etc. That's second. Third is, if you go to the global trend which are being talked about, global trend very clearly says that the impact of failure is very, very high, and impact of failure sometimes is even intangible in terms of brand and reputation. So if you look at financial and non-financial impact together, there is a clear need for this area to be focused by each and every organization, irrespective of the level of outsourcing. That is third. Fourth is, within the vendor risk management program, one is the technology piece of it. Second is, how do you really pick and choose the relevant sub parameters and make sure that basics are taken care of in terms of well-defined policy procedures, have enough training and awareness, contracting is done right, there are legal clauses available, there are anti-bribery clauses available, somebody is doing SLA monitoring. And then the fourth aspect is how your service providers are dealing the softer aspect with respect to environment, climate change, labor condition, employee treatment, and living up to certain basic values of the organization, like diversity and inclusion for that matter, right? That's fourth. And fifth is, auditor needs to play a role in each of the landscape in terms of the program, how it is being arrived at, and at various program level, what are some of the checkpoints which are being developed, and is it being monitored or not? Because a lot of time, at least I have seen in my limited audit experience, there are various checkpoints being built in contract, but those are never being enforced. And since those are not being enforced, it just become paper document, and when something goes wrong, it will be too late for you to really act on it. So this is the 4-5 key message I would like to give with respect to vendor risk. And this is a highly neglected area, because somebody believe that if you are doing a procure to pay review, you may look at contracting also, but contracting alone doesn't really solve the vendor risk management problem. It is a far bigger problem, and hence I would request each one of you to think through in your organization of how vendor risk management is being considered. Is there a thought on vendor risk is a key risk to be considered in your risk assessment, etc., and it is being taken up as an audit area? Most organization you would not find this being taken up as an audit area, and therefore it won't get the desired level of attention. Since it's not getting a desired level of attention, organization will continue to have a kind of a risk of failure, which could be extremely significant. I think that's the concluding message, Yukti, I wanted to give, and happy to address if there are any questions. Yeah, so I think one question I can see is on the IPR pillar. Will there be the escrow arrangement to be placed? Escrow arrangement will become part. Achha, someone has answered. Okay, so Yukti would have answered.
Yeah.
Is SOC 1 and 2, there is a question, Yukti. You want to take it up?
Yeah. So there was a question.
This is answered. Okay.
Yeah, I have answered that.
Okay. So if there are any other question, happy to take up. Frankly, it's been, I'm sure, a busy day for most of us, but it was indeed a pleasure connecting with each one of you in terms of sharing our thoughts on the area which we believe is indeed an area to be focused upon in audit as well as in your normal process. Even if you are part of procurement team, for example, it is important to look at the vendor risk management in a holistic manner for you to protect your organization. Yeah, and happy to pick up any other thread if anyone wants to share. Otherwise, we are good to go and maybe conclude the session.
So there's one question during COVID, how we can do the due diligence?
No, so when you say due diligence, how do you do due diligence is a matter of how well you have defined the criterias. If you have really defined the criterias well, most criteria can be done by way of video calls, phone calls, and many other discrete inquiries. And you will have certain partners or certain associate who can give you an input of a particular area where your service provider is without even visiting that area. So therefore, COVID doesn't make too much of difference in terms of controls. Yes, the physical control on your third party service provider may be sometimes difficult to evaluate in the COVID scenario. However, if you really follow the technology of video conferencing, he can show you enough demonstration about how safety security is being managed, what type of facilities are provided for the employees, how he's managing machines, etc., etc. So I don't see COVID as an issue in terms of managing any physical part of it. Greatly it can be managed, and also you can use your local partner. So net you are good to go even in a COVID scenario. Yes, COVID has brought in a lot of risk which you should factor in your vendor risk management program if it is not already done. Thank you, Amitji, Chanchal, and the entire IIA team for giving us the opportunity.
Thanks, Amit. Thanks, Chanchal, and thanks to all the participants for being here. Thank you very much.
Thanks you, everyone. Thanks.
Everyone.
Thank you. Bye.